Welcome to Founded on Purpose, the show where we get to know the people working to align business and impact, profit and purpose. I'm your host, Kt McBratney. Each episode, we welcome a guest to answer the same set of questions, and they might be the same questions, but they always open up a wonderfully different conversation. And today, I'm joined by Walter Lay, the founder and CEO of Branch, the free nonpartisan website that walks you through your unique ballot so you can vote with confidence for every office in every election. He's a software engineer and product manager before he quit his fintech job in 2020 to build Branch, and he's passionate about using tech to make the world a better place, which I'm excited to talk about a lot more. Walter, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So many things. We're in 2025, February as we record, and you are building a platform and have been building a platform that has been active in many, many campaigns up and down the ballot in the past almost 5 years since you've been running Branch. So I'm sure this is going to be a rich convo. And honestly, timely no matter when we would have recorded it, right? Because that's something I appreciate about Branch is that it isn't just the elections that are grabbing headlines. You've really built it to focus on all of the elections, all of the issues that affect all of us. And that's been intentional since the start, right?
Yeah, totally. And what you said too, when we first scheduled this podcast, it was a month ago, I think. And it's just funny how it felt timely then if we had have talked, and now it's timely in a whole different way. But yeah, that's always been the purpose, from kind of when I started, is this idea of how do we connect people with the sort of aspects of politics that they're not hearing about, the sort of aspects of politics that really give people a sense of agency and power. So yeah.
So we're going to start where we start with everyone. You also said the magic word purpose. So in one word, what's your purpose?
Hope.
All right. Say more.
When I first got into this, one of the big things that was very evident to me is that people felt very hopeless when it came to politics. And in that way, especially right now, I think that is very much a popular sentiment. I think the whole idea about living in a democracy is that, people run the show, and that, we have the agency to kind of chart our own path and, create our society for ourselves. And I think that a lot of people feel very much disconnected from that. I think a lot of people are very anxious and fearful about, the future of our country. And I think that's true even across the political spectrum. I think a lot of people feel decisions are made by these bigger powers and, bigger sources of kind of concentrated power that they just don't have access to. And I would say, yeah, in a word, reinstilling that hope that people actually do have a lot of agency. It just might not be in ways that they recognize that there's still plenty of ways in which their vote has an impact, in which their personal voice and personal actions actually can influence a lot about what happens. It's just not the first thing that they think about, which is, the presidential election, the presidential race that, you hear about nonstop. But that there's plenty of other opportunities where, people can have that sort of impact.
Yeah. Have you always been a hopeful person? Right? You mentioned some really great reasons and context around why hope is important right now, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. But have you always been a hopeful or optimistic person?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think so. I've always been this sort of person that, somebody messes something up or, does something rude or something, and I try to, I think, naturally lean towards, well, maybe they meant this, and, maybe their intention is this. And I think generally I'm someone who believes that, people are good and want to do good. And that's something that generally like binds us together. So I think so. I think even when things are bleak, I tend to have a hope that we're still on a path towards, things getting better in the long run.
Yeah, because we still have agency, right? Like we have the next set of choices where we get to make, and how we choose to make them, right? It's a hopeful moment. I also think, I was talking with an entrepreneur yesterday, and in my experience, founders tend to be almost ruthlessly optimistic, right? Like you're doing these incredibly, sometimes risky, very challenging, very exciting, very rewarding things. And I feel like hope is a tool, right? And optimism can be a tool because you're always pushing that boulder up the hill. There's always going to be some kind of challenge.
Yeah, I think that's like a very true insight. You kind of have to be as a founder, because the whole idea of a founder is that like you are usually imagining something that does not exist, and you're usually imagining like a way to create that thing while looking around and seeing all these like companies that have died trying to do the same thing as you, and you say, I'm going to be different, I'm going to do this. And I think
it can happen.
Yeah,
we can do it.
I feel like that's the common founder journey. It's like a certain level of delusion, and it sounds wild and crazy until one day it's not, and
then we just accept it as the norm, or as like, of course that worked, of course.
Totally. Yeah,
the overnight, the myth of the overnight success.
Yeah.
Like I love all of the chatter about like Doechii and the Grammys, and everyone's like, oh, Doechii, Chaperone, they came out of nowhere. Like they have been working and building and being intentional and seeing, similar to a founder, right? Like seeing this possibility for their art, their craft, their creations to exist in a world that is full of systems and just challenges that are like, nope.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to keep it on the positive note with question 2.
Well, it feels very positive comparing us to Doechii and Chaperone. I'm honored.
Hey, if the incredibly stylish shoe fits, please wear it. Tell us about one of your most recent wins.
Let's see. There's kind of 2 things that come to mind, which again, we scheduled this conversation like a month ago. It feels like so much has even changed since then. January
was the longest decade of my life.
The 2024 year for us, 2024 election cycle was really exciting. Just in terms of, prior to 2024, we were in 3 states. We had a total annual user base of probably, I think 60 or 70,000 people, which was amazing. And this year, we are now in 12 states. We brought on a bunch of new clients in like the nonprofit space. And so went through a lot of growth on that side, and went through growth on our team, and just also went through growth in terms of our actual user base, which is all really exciting. And again, I think for me, that just helped to kind of affirm this sort of hopeful picture, this path forward that I see. And so that was a really exciting year. And I don't know, I have another answer as well, maybe a more recent one.
Sure.
But
hey, you celebrate as many as you want.
I appreciate that. And since then we have been, most of our work is focused in kind of the election space. Mm-hmm. Which there's elections every year, but it's still very much like there's downtime in between those elections a lot of times. But at the end of last year, we started working with a few essentially like media groups, newsrooms, to kind of help them with the way that they organize their political data and data about elected officials and candidates. And that was a really exciting opportunity. It was a whole new kind of segment, market segment for us. And since then, we've been like talking with a lot of those groups about, how they cover the news now that the election is over, in ways that we can kind of use our expertise in terms of product design and political data, and use that to kind of help their journalists be a lot more effective in covering, the news in between elections. And so that's been a really exciting opportunity that we've gotten some really great, just sort of early traction on, and just is exciting because it offers us a whole new opportunity to kind of stay engaged within the political space year round, but also do it in a way that's kind of aiding these, journalists that have that expertise in this space and are invested in it. So that's been a really cool new almost business to like explore within Branch.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk journalism for just a second, or the intersection of three tenets that I love. You have front and center on your website. Like, these are not hidden, these are not marketing slogan, but they're about having a nonpartisan promise, journalistic integrity, and data privacy. And because you brought up newsrooms and journalism, like, we obviously have seen tide shifting in all kinds of journalism and in bias in all of the information that we have so readily available at our fingertips all of the time, no matter what. As you mentioned, this expansion into this new kind of business segment, working with newsrooms, I have to ask, like, how has journalistic integrity, as someone who went, to Georgia Tech, who has a engineering and product background, how did that get woven into really the DNA of what Branch is and how you operate it, right? Not just the product experience, but how you're building it as a company and a culture.
Yeah, totally. It was kind of interesting because, like, Branch very much started as, like, from the start, I envisioned it as a company, but I'm much more of a mission-centered person. And so it was very much like, this product needs to exist. I created it. I had some help from like really amazing friends and just other folks in Atlanta the first year to kind of get this thing off the ground. And then eventually it was like, now how are we going to make money off of this? And
the age-old question.
The age-old question. And so that was kind of my, I was more centered around this idea, like, this is something that needs to exist. And which is relevant to this question, because really these like three things, I would say, were woven in the first year when like there almost was no financial consideration, which I think is really powerful. It was, back when this thing was almost in its purest form of like a idea, like a purely purpose-built thing to help like solve this problem. And there was obviously a much bigger, vision long-term, but when it was kind of in that like very simple form, a lot of these tenets are sort of like promises came from people that we interface with. A lot of people were like very concerned on the onset about like, well, if I'm giving you my data, if I'm signing up, like, are you going to like, tell people who I'm voting for? Are you going to like disclose this information or whatever? And again, I was like, no, of course not. We wouldn't do that. We won't do that. And we can make a promise about that. So we did it. And then it's just funny now, like fast forward 5 years, how many opportunities actually have come across our desk that people will be like, we would love this data. We'll pay you for this data. We'll, we can like, I really access this. And in a way, it's like, you make a promise to a friend, not realizing what it's going to take to keep that. And then you look back and you're like, sorry, I made a promise. All the people that come to our site use it predicated on that promise. And so that's the promise. And so it's been really interesting because that's, in a way, I would say I like made those when I was a little bit more naive, and I think those have kept us very much like true to that sort of like, you know, bright-eyed early vision, which has been really cool.
You've made a commitment to what your North Star is going to be, and while sure you could break that commitment, you also are so aware of what the costs of that would be, right? Like it's not just I could break that commitment and some people would be mad. It would You've built an incredible foundation on it, and that would crumble it. And I think that that's such a powerful thing that at the time it sounds like, yeah, we promise, it's fine. But you were really laying an incredible kind of cornerstone for how you're building the company and how you can be a leader and work with other companies like these newsrooms.
Yeah. And a big thing, like, I think just within politics in general, that I see as lacking is just like trust. And that's something that we talk about all the time as like a value of ours, is like building trust, like actively, how do we build trust with people within politics? And I think a really easy way to do that, or straightforward way to do that, is to like keep your word about things. But I think just in general, people are very skeptical when it comes to politics. People are very used to seeing elected officials say one thing and do another. And to me, the one of the bigger themes of what we're trying to do is rebuild people's trust within politics, in addition to rebuilding kind of their sense of hope and agency. And we can't do that if we don't do that ourselves. That doesn't really make sense.
You got to walk the talk.
Yeah.
All right. Since we're talking mission and promises and commitments, what's a hill you would die on? For context, it does not have to be the most serious topic. It can be something that I have very strong feelings about the Oxford comma, which I will gladly get into with anybody who's interested.
Are you pro Oxford comma or anti Oxford comma?
I am anti-Oxford comma unless it's needed for clarity. I went to journalism school, and that is against AP style. And it's brought very lively conversation into my life. But just as one example, that like to me, the Oxford comma is serious business.
I do have one.
Okay.
This is a silly, serious one.
Yes.
Which is that I think that almond milk should not exist.
All right, let's talk about it.
I was vegan for a stint. I support a good milk alternative. I think there are a lot of really great alternatives out there, and I think that almond milk is not one of them. And anytime somebody has almond milk or orders something with almond milk, it really catches me off guard, and dare I say is wrong. So
hey, that's all right. Draw that line in the sand. I mean, I am not an almond milk fan myself. Now that you bring it up, I'm like, I don't know the last time I saw somebody order something with almond milk. Even
they're amongst us.
I'm gonna go to the coffee shop later and ask. I'm gonna be like, how many people go for the almond milk? Okay, what is your alternative milk of choice?
I drink a lot of soy milk. I wouldn't say it's the best tasting one, but to me, it's very, protein rich, neutral tasting.
Hey, this is why I love this podcast, is like, we start talking politics. We take a little slight turn to talk about alternative milk products. Who knows where the rest of the conversation will take us. But I also have never actively chosen almond milk. And I think that if that was my only alternative, I would get a different drink personally.
Well, I do appreciate that. I will say I appreciate your supporting of me, and I am a big Oxford comma fan. So I know your support of my almond milk stance makes me think I need to reconsider.
I mean, just think about it. Do you need a comma in red, comma, white, comma, and blue? No, it reads just fine. Save that space, right? Like every pixel matters. No, it's okay. We can still be friends. I promise. I will not hold it against you. Well, how do you even define what field you're in, right? Like earlier in your career, you could say like, I'm a software engineer, or I work in product, or I work in fintech. So 2-part question. 1, what field do you work in? And second question, what do you think is the single biggest missed opportunity in it?
This is interesting because this is one of those things where I don't really care what field I work in. Like, people ask that, and if I put it down to paper, I say media and civic technology. That's what Branch is. We're a media and civic technology company, but that's mainly just for other people that I like say that to like kind of give them a sense. But I don't really think about that a lot, which I think is kind of like freeing. I think one of the aspects I've really enjoyed about like being a founder is I think there's a certain sense of like making up your own rules and definitions. And I think for me, I worked for a little while for another startup out of college, and then I founded Branch right after that. And so in a lot of ways, I was very kind of like, there's just a lot that I didn't know. And when you don't know things, you kind of just like make up your own things. You make up your own rules, a path forward and such. And
you don't inherit other people's systems and processes and definitions even.
Totally. And at first, I mean, when I say at first, I mean like the first like 4.5 years, I felt very kind of like insecure about those things, where it was like, people would ask me certain questions about, have you thought about this, or what's your, X, Y, and Z strategy? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what that is. And I have to go like look it up. And so I don't know, I would say I felt very like sort of insecure about that. But I think that as I've started to like read the stories of other great founders, other great thinkers, other great, writers, musicians, whatever it is, I think like a very common thread that all of these people share is this idea of making up their own playbook. And I think that when you're constantly worried about like, I don't know, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of stuff that I learned from other thought leaders in the field, things that I try and borrow. But I think that this sort of idea of not knowing everything and not knowing like the way that things are supposed to be done and kind of having to come up with your own is actually like kind of a sort of superpower. I'm so sorry. What was the original question?
I don't care. I want to go on this thread. Like, we're going to keep following this thread. I mean, we were talking about missed opportunities, and I think you're actually naming a huge one, which is the opportunity to do it the way that's right for you, your company, your values, right? If we're talking about outside and inside the workplace, right? Like the missed opportunity of saying like, this playbook isn't like dogma. I don't have to follow it. Totally. I don't have to even look for it, right? You can find best practices and you can learn, but this myth of there being a single one right way to do it is something that like I know I fully do not subscribe to. Like I am like, pass. Because then what is innovation, right? Like if we say we want a different outcome, but we do the same thing, isn't that the definition of insanity actually?
And I think it's like a common, I would say sort of like travesty of the sort of startup VC path intersection is I think that a lot of founders don't really get enough sort of free play time to figure out their own playbook. And because they're constantly running into VCs who have the playbook. And, I know there's probably a lot of variety within the VC ecosystem, Renew being a great, example of that. But as a founder, it feels like a lot of times VCs are operating from the same sort of playbook, the same, what's your this, what's your this, what's your this, what's your exit strategy, and they have the same questions. And, as a founder, if you go through 50 conversations with, VCs that are asking the same sort of thing, you kind of adopt that, and in any way in which you like don't measure up to that is kind of like perceived as a failure.
You almost like absorb those rules, even if that's not the game you intended on playing. Yeah, there's this interesting thing that like I wish I had learned in my career as an operator and a founder earlier. And it's that, like, of course, like there is a certain set of, I guess you could say, rules or a certain kind of playbook when it comes to being VC funded, because they're typically 10-year vehicles and they have certain terms. And so it's a clear kind of like there is a playbook, right, for that asset class and that kind of funding. And once you have that venture capital check, right, once you have that VC wire, those funds wired over, like that clock starts ticking, right? Because it's their fiduciary responsibility. And I say that like being on this side now. And I've seen, and I've certainly felt, when you're a founder and you don't realize that like those are the rules really of that game, like you're on that path already once you have those funds. And so like being able to explore like and give yourself that space to play and say like, what is our path? What is our ideal exit? Is it a venture scale exit? Is it a $500 million company that is like wildly used across the globe? That is a very, very valid definition of success. Totally. Right. And so is a $200 million company or a $5 million company. It's also,
I love that you say that like $500 million can still be considered successful. It's like, yeah, totally. That's amazing.
It's wild. Like, and I get it. Like in venture outcomes, like they're looking and we're looking for those big exits, these big $1 billion companies.
Yeah.
And not every business should be $1 billion company. That's just quite literally impossible, unsustainable. And like personally, I have no interest and I'm not qualified to run $1 billion company. And I have done a lot of things in my life that I would consider successful. That's just one of them, right? And so like this missed opportunity to write your own playbook, I think is a lesson, not even a lesson, but a reality that I think a lot of founders will appreciate hearing.
Yeah, totally.
Because oftentimes, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was getting on my soapbox. Please, you're the guest.
We're both on your soapbox then, because I feel like I got very lucky in the old startup that I worked at. I remember I had a mentor who like pulled me aside one day and he, told me this kind of like North Star rule of being a startup. He's like, the most important thing that you need from day one, you need to have an exit plan. And he told me that like, that's like the most important thing. And so I kind of grew up and, went on thinking that was kind of, Bible, like when I was like starting my own company. And I got very lucky in that I was touring my friend had just started working at MailChimp, and I went with her to tour the office. And I started asking questions about the way that MailChimp is run and everything. And this was years ago. Now MailChimp has exited, but she told me about how they're like a privately run company. They don't have any plans to exit. They're how that also circles back and influences and reinforces the culture. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't even know that could exist at the time. And I don't know, that was very helpful in kind of broadening my perspective at like a very critical time to do that. And I ended up building Branch. To date, we really haven't had any VC money, except for we went through the Techstars Impact Accelerator. And all of our growth has been focused on, revenue. That's what we've been focused on when we think about like capital acquisition. And there might be a future in which like we, take on capital to grow and to better like suit our mission. But it's been really, I think, good. And ultimately, I think it's like also better for our product this early on to have not done that, because it allows us to focus more on revenue and creating a really great product. A lot of that is also, sort of something that's available to us because of my own like technical skill set. I could create this without having to like hire other people, which is something that a lot of startups get to do.
But it's also like reinforces that an entrepreneur's job is to build a successful business.
Yeah.
Sometimes that involves raising capital from. There are different ways of doing that. But the primary goal is not to fundraise. The primary job of a founder is to build a successful business and know those options are out there and choose the right one for you. And of course, I'm not poo-pooing venture capital as an entire category. It has a use. It has a place. But it's one option of many that truly the founders you're such a good example, and you're just dropping wisdom on like find your playbook, find your path, instead of just like assuming that the way you're hearing about it in the media or in podcasts or whatever is the only way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people get that wrong. Like funding is meant to be a tool to help you accomplish a bigger goal. And I think a lot of, do you know like the infinite game concept?
Mm-hmm.
You know this?
Tell us. Yep. Lay it out
for our listeners. I forget who the original like author of this like concept was, but Simon Sinek made it, I think, more popular. But he talks about like the finite game, which is generally things that in life, like a game, like a sports game or something like that, where you have set players, you have set rules, you have an agreed upon definition of like what success looks like, what winning looks like. But most things in life are an infinite game, which is that there is no one definition of what success looks like. The players change over time, and I think the real challenge or rub, as he explains it, is that a lot of times we try to make things that are infinite games into finite games. So we treat business like it's this kind of time-bound, very specific thing, but in reality, it's not. The way that concept really resonates with me is, I think a lot of young people, you go through school and you've had this whole entire path so far of like, you get good grades and that's like an A is the best you can get. And then you like get into a good college but it's all these sort of like ways to like win these little games.
And everybody's more or less within the same set of rules and constraints.
Totally.
The same definitions. And like, there's a clear way to win. And then even though there's really not, but then you graduate and then you're out into the real world. Now you have to kind of grapple with this idea of like, there is no rule. And I think you put a founder in that mindset. And I think a lot of founders, the very clear validation, the clear way to win the game is to raise money. Because in reality, that's the most kind of simple, objective thing. It's what gets a lot of press coverage. It's what you see happening to other successful startups around you. But in reality, that doesn't make a startup. It doesn't break a startup either. That's not winning the game because there is no game to be won. If anything, it's the bigger picture of building a successful business. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. A measure might be a measure of success is your business around in 5 years? Do your employees want to come to work? Are you able to pay a living wage? Are you having a culture that is in line with your values as a founder, or you dealing with dissonance between that, right? Are you
100%? Yeah.
Are you having happy customers who are mutually participating in a transaction, right? And being like, yes, please take my money. I would like that thing, versus unfortunately what's happened to a lot of journalism where we see a paywall and we're like annoyed and pissed off, and the journalists are getting paid nothing and don't have healthcare, right? And like that dynamic, it doesn't matter how many clicks your website gets. There's elements of it's not a binary game. It's not even a game, to your point. It's just not a binary outcome. Oh my gosh, this is so good. I'm like, I love it when I deter from my questions and I'm like, no, let's be in this. Let's keep pulling at the threads. which is part of the reason that I was like, hey guys, trust me to run the podcast this way. We might get a little existential. We're going to get a little bit deep, but that's the point, because even with an amazing team, being a founder can be a lonely road. And to your point, like the media narratives are a lot about like winning and like what I like to call like the bro of it all. And these flexes that are flexes and not actually substance, right? Like being able to be like, no, I have paying customers. Yes. Like I can think about different revenue streams. Yes, I can hire and retain good talent because we have a good culture. Like those things I unfortunately don't get as much digging into. And with community always kind of somewhere central in my brain, even if I'm not actively thinking about it, it's kind of like a Pied Piper call for not only just fellow founders, but people who are interested in living this kind of life, having this kind of a career where you can say like, you don't have to run that playbook. Like you could literally rip it all up and make a new one, and it's okay. I think it's really important for people to hear that and not just normalize it, but like see and hear how it's playing out for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think like this is totally going to undercut everything I just said with my previous answer. But when you talk about like, the sort of bro of it all, I think that's like a really fun thing that like when startups get distracted by capital instead of, building a business, that's I'm gonna throw that down as like a gauntlet one day. I'm gonna be like, what's your revenue, bro? And then we'll see what happens.
Hey, I'm here for it. All right. I could sit and talk to you all day. This happens often on the podcast where I'm like, oh crap, your time is valuable and I've taken a lot of it, and you've graciously shared it with me and with our audience. So I'm going to hone in on two final questions.
Sure.
You've shared some really great wisdom, including things that you've heard from mentors and just figures that you've known in your life. How do you know, as a first-time founder who has been doing this for almost 5 years, how do you know what advice to take? Like, what's your advice on getting advice?
When I was doing the Techstars program, they like warn you about this, but one of the things that you get is like, it's called like mentor backlash or mentor whiplash or something like this. They have a term for it, but it's this idea that you meet with literally 30 or 40 people that you speed date, and they all have something to say about your business and what you should do and what you should do differently. And at that point we had a pretty solid business, and I was like, I'm not worried about that. Like I know who I am. I know who we are. Like I'm going to be good at assimilating feedback, and it like really took it out of me. So it can get very overwhelming, especially if you're again on the VC hunt. Everybody has 2 cents about kind of what to do differently.
And some of them have a whole dollar's worth that they are not trying to share.
I think part of I don't know if I really have like a set of rules about this, because I think that's kind of part of the like journey is, learning to like distill it all and listen to it all. I think generally I'm someone who is much more prone to listen as opposed to tune things out. I think that tuning advice out or saying that things aren't relevant to you, I think in my mind, I don't know if this is true or not, but in my mind, that's like a path to like disaster. If I think that a lot of founders can maybe get like tone deaf, whether it's listening to your customers or not listening to, other like trusted sources or people who generally are very smart. And I think there is like a way to go too far on this lens of like kind of tuning things out. But I don't know. I don't really have like a set of rules. I think the whole process of like getting overwhelmed by advice and having to digest it all and having to spit some of it back out, I think that's kind of the like fortifying process of, becoming a founder.
No, thank you for saying that, because I'm also someone who doesn't have a set framework for something like that, which doesn't always make for a pithy answer, but is more honest and speaks to how I process that kind of information. Excuse me. I'm very much like I need to absorb and distill and synthesize. And that's going to look different based on not just who's giving advice or what sources of information I have, but also like the context of that situation.
Yeah.
Right. Like it could be a small decision where I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to make this choice and we're going to see what happens. This will be fun. But it also might be something that requires a lot more diligence and thought and processing. And so like for me, I can't really, it's a bit of alchemy that I think is also indicative of being on a journey of learning and growth versus running a static playbook.
Yeah. And I think things change too. Like, I would say maybe more important than, listening to advice is probably like listening to customers, listening to users, listening also to like the market in general. And for us, we're in this situation where working in politics, even from like a month ago, the environment that we are in has changed so much. And although like that seems very like obvious and everyone, you're hearing about this all the time, it's to listen to like the changing sort of environment or market is like a very like, it doesn't tell you, here's advice I have. It's just like a whisper, and you have to like really tune into that. And a lot of times that also requires you putting your own sort of, I'm talking about this because this is actively what we're trying to do right now, but it requires you putting your own plans on hold, putting your own sort of vision on hold, and really like tuning in with what's happening right now. And is there a way that we can grow to kind of meet that moment? And I think that is, I don't know, something that people seek you out for advice. They'll tell you your advice, like you said, a whole dollar's worth sometimes. But I think that people, probably I've done that where I just haven't paid enough attention to the actual changing environment or the people who are actually doing this for.
The customer discovery, right? Like they're not here to tell you what the solution they need is. They're here to share what the problem is, the problem they need help solving, and yeah, just being able to even hold your own assumptions, your own vision, and like use that. You mentioned a North Star. It sounds like that is a compass of sorts, is listening to the market and listening to customers and acknowledging those whispers and asking questions or sitting with them. All right. Oh, I have so many things that I'm like, want to talk about. I want to end here. What is the most challenging part of your job? And what is the favorite thing that you get to do as the founder of Branch?
I would say the most challenging thing for me has been this. I am a builder. I built a lot of Branch. When people interact with a product, they're interacting with, what my own 10 fingers have built. And just recently, we've really gotten to the point where the sort of scale and demand is outpacing what I can keep up with. And that has been something I've always looked forward to. I've always been excited for the point when like our team can finally grow. And when it came, it's really challenging. It's challenging not so much to let go, but to kind of learn a whole new skill set. And, a lot of what's kept me going over the last like 4 or 5 years is just because I enjoy the process. I love the process of building, of talking to customers. But those things that you kind of love doing yourself, you kind of eventually have to grow an organization that can kind of do them for you. And that's been an interesting thing I found myself in the last like probably 3 or 4 months. And so far we did just recently bring on a CTO, and he's been doing really great.
Congrats.
Thank you.
A big milestone.
In terms of just like, so all that to be said, I think a huge piece of that is just having a team that you can trust, and that's been very exciting. But yeah, I would say generally that's been a challenge, and not just with building, technically, but also with just building the business as a whole. So I think that has probably been a challenge. But what I love the most, I love so much about what I get to do. It's amazing. I love like the sort of creative freedom that comes with being a founder. I love the sort of like independence, the sort of, I'm always someone that was very like stifled by having to like get, 2 tiers of approval for everything that I wanted to do. And so not having
relatable,
to do that.
So relatable. I felt that in my bones as you said it.
Not having to do that. And also a big part of our culture is like also making sure that I'm not the only one that has that sort of independence, but that like everyone below me organizationally also has that independence. So that is something I love doing. I love getting to like engage my like scientific mind. So getting to like run experiments and like try new opportunities. I love, to me, like being a founder sits at like the intersection of like so many things that I did before being a founder that I always thought I have to like choose a single path. And I just love that I'm getting to do it and getting to do it in a way that creates a positive impact for people. People are like so kind about the work that we do. You've been very kind about the work that
I'm a proud branch user. Like I've said it before. Like I literally use it before every election. It's so helpful.
Yeah, which is just wild to hear. And that is like very, very fortifying, very gratifying. So I love everything about it.
And also that was not a solicited, like I started this call before we started recording. I was like, literally I use it every election. Thank you. Like this is so wonderful. So just saying, like, this is an authentic endorsement of it as a user of the product. And I think like that's the thing. You're doing it. You're doing the thing. Like people are using and loving something that came from your brain, your 10 fingers, and now your team, right? To reach how many people have used Branch to help with their election, like to be informed about their voting?
This past year, we hit our 1 million user mark in 2024. So very exciting year for us.
Wow. Congrats. Thanks. We talked about wins earlier and you buried the lead on that. Okay. Well, let's keep that going. How can people engage with Branch? How can they find you online? Let us know, because I'm sure there are lots of people who are like, please tell me more.
Yeah, totally. So our website is www.branch.vote. Folks can go on there and see their past election if they want to. They can sign up for reminders so that their next election coming up, hopefully this year, they get reminded for. And that's something that's available to everybody. If you're more interested in connecting and talking, LinkedIn is my platform. So feel free to reach out and connect.
This is so great. Thank you so much for this. I'm like gonna go to the coffee shop and observe if I see anyone order with almond milk. Not judge, I'm just observing. Almond milk lovers, we are not coming for you.
Yeah. Totally
I'm not. Walter might be. Oxford comma. We're going to have some chats. Check out Branch. Connect with Walter. This is an incredible conversation. And I know I'm going to be thinking about what playbooks I'm choosing actively to work from and which ones I am building for us and what we're building in our own way. So thank you for that.
I love that. Thanks for having me. This has been really great.